something we do is we kind of put them together, and generally it is fine. And I'm just going to run through some things that we do here. And like I said, if you've got any questions at any point, please just feel free to interrupt and ask. The first thing I'm just going to show you, it's a writing task. I'm sure you're all kind of familiar with these writing tasks. What we've done here is we've basically written this task ourselves. So we got together and we kind of created a bank of resources. And what you'll notice just down at the bottom, I've just highlighted there, there's actually two tasks. There's a nursing task and there's a medicine task as well. The nursing task is to the dietitian. The medicine task, it's to a doctor working in a diabetes clinic. So we've created these case notes with these two tasks in mind. The advantage, you've probably seen things like this before. The Kaplan book have been doing stuff like this. And I mean, I haven't seen the new edition, to be honest, but with the older edition, we thought something was lacking slightly with their tasks. So we created our own. The advantage of doing something like this is really you can do whole class feedback. We do a lot of writing at home. Sometimes, of course, we do it in class. But this, for example, would be given for homework. It would be marked and the candidates get individual feedback. But the nice thing is that you can actually talk to them as a whole class. So even when you're talking to the nurses about the dietitian, the doctors they're aware of what you're talking about. And generally they're interested as well. So that's a nice thing to do. It's kind of a bit takes a lot of time, but it's kind of worth doing, I think. This is something else. This is about selecting case notes. And yeah, you can see here at the top, I'm just trying to highlight here, it says home nurse, and then you've got a family member. So this is, go back, this is a task for nurses. And then here you've got a cardiologist and you've got a GP as well. But what you notice is that the case notes are the same. They're exactly the same. They're identical. So this is something you would do in class. And actually I'd pair the nurses together and I'd pair the doctors together, and they have to go through the case notes, selecting which is relevant and which is semi-relevant. And for each recipient, that is at the same time. Basically, once they've done that, I just give them the answer key and they check themselves. But once again, I think the advantage of this is that you can do whole class feedback. You can feedback together, and you can take comments from doctors and from nurses, and it's quite nice then to discuss the whole task. I just wondered if there's any questions there. No, it seems okay. Okay. So probably you're aware the principles are the same, whether you're teaching how to select case notes or how to organize or transform case notes. And it doesn't really matter too much, I found, whether if you've got doctors and nurses together. Okay, so this is something else you might look at we do in class as well. I stole this off Rebecca's masterclass video, to be honest, but again, it's something you can present to the whole class. You're looking at identifying the purpose. It goes back to selection of case notes, really. It doesn't matter whether you've got a doctor or whether you've got nurses here. The principle, it's the same principle. You're looking at the recipient, what their job is. You're looking at the purpose, what you want them to do as well, and the relationship to the patient. All of this, it doesn't discriminate. You don't need to, it doesn't matter whether it's a nurse, an optometrist, whether it's a vet. The principles really are the same. Thinking about organizing as well, this is another task that we do in class. Um, we do a really brief thing about different ways to organize your letter. Um, and we've got organizing letters chronologically, and we've got organizing letters as order of importance. And we do two examples, and the language is really simple, and we try to keep it neutral. And then also looking at paragraphing as well. And you can see the case notes here. It could really be done by a doctor, it could be done by a nurse. It doesn't really matter too much. We try to make sure that the case notes are fairly neutral, and you could use it with either profession. Again, the way I do it would be to put not doctors and nurses together, but it's a bit more like doing EFL. So I'd pair a strong student, a student who's quite good with grammar, perhaps with a weaker student. So you can actually mix them up. You can actually get doctors and nurses working together here. And again, just quickly, the way we do it, they'd write a letter, a paragraph individually, and then they talk to their partner, and then you can just do some feedback as you like. But with everything I'm saying, there's variations. There's lots of different ways to do stuff. So talking about transforming case notes, and again, this is just another task we do in class. Here, we're looking at, I've isolated these case notes. They're very simple and they're ambiguous. It could be from a nurse's task, it could be from a doctor's task. Again, what they would do, it doesn't matter whether you've got a nurse and a doctor working together, they'd work individually, they transform these case notes into a sentence, and then they work with their partner. Principles are the same again as EFL. Really, you're focusing on language. You might pair weaker and stronger students together. And again, you can do whole class feedback. Then you do feedback, and again, these are just different options which you can discuss as a class. Okay. With the, again, what I've done here is that I've isolated these case notes. So there's no real context here, but again, the learning objective is really, it's almost grammatical. It's taking these notes and just putting them into a sentence. I don't know. I don't know. You might recognize these case notes. Do you recognize these case notes? Yeah, you do. They're actually, I think they're from the sample paper, and they're a nursing task, but you could well use them with medicine as well. It's the same kind of thing. They work individually. They write a sentence. They compare with their partner, and then you might take some feedback. And again, these are just different answers, different alternatives, and the focus really is grammar. And so it doesn't really matter. The content doesn't matter so much. The objective is grammar. So again, it doesn't matter too much about the profession. Okay. So something else is content. I'm just going to try to explain. Go back to my video here. I don't know. Can you see me? Yeah. Okay. Great. So another lesson. I'm going to try to explain this as simply as I can. I get confused when I explain this, so I try and keep it simple. What we do with a criteria lesson, it's over 2 days. So the doctors would get a task, and the nurses get a task. They get two separate tasks. And that's their homework, basically, is to do their writing task at home. But the nurses will also get the doctor's task, but they get the sample answer. So we don't ask them to do the task. They just need to be familiar with it. And also vice versa, the doctors get the nurse's task. They don't do it, but then they get the sample answer. They just need to be familiar with it. They've done that for homework. The next day they come to class, they've done their task, and hopefully, theoretically, they've read the other task as well, so they've got some kind of awareness about the other task for the other profession. Let's go back here. And then going through the criteria, I mean, it's kind of neutral. It doesn't really matter. It's the same, everyone's marked to the same criteria. So we kind of go through it, and here's just looking at content, and generally we do a presentation looking at the content and talking through it as well, taking questions and doing some feedback as well. And then once we've been through the criteria, again, this is just really just stuff for content. And as you can see, there's nothing here specifically about doctors. There's nothing here specifically about nurses or optometrists or vets or anything. It's completely neutral. Like, you know, I mean, everyone's marked to the same criteria. And then having gone through the criteria, what we do is basically with the letters that they've done, we look at a candidate's answer. So we've given them a sample answer. They know what's relevant. And then we look at a candidate answer here, and we go through the criteria. And this is the doctor's task. And we show how the student has performed according to the criteria. Hopefully, the nurses would understand. They've done their homework theoretically, so they know what you're talking about at least. And we do the same with the nurses then. We'll then get a student's answer with the nurses, and we go through all the different criteria and we show how it was marked. The doctor's answer is a good answer. The nurse's answer, I think it was a not so good. So they've got the contrast between a good answer and a not such a good answer. And then once they've done that, they take their own letter, we give them the criteria, and they try to mark the letter themselves according to the criteria. I don't know if that made sense. Do you have any questions here? No.
About the semi-relevant ones, how to when to include the semi-relevant and when to omit it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. But...
it's about the semi-relevant information.
Sure.
When, yeah.
Yeah.
When to,
I couldn't hear you. It didn't come through. I heard you say something about the semi-relevant information.
there was certain semi-relevant information. So my doubt is like when should we include those semi-relevant ones and when to omit those?
I tell you what, because I can't hear you, do you want to type in the chat box? And I'll see if I can... Okay. So you've said one area most students have difficulty is in the inclusion or omission of semi-relevant information. Yeah, it's true. And it's a skill. And that's the thing, it's a skill that's not really easy to teach, but it's the keynotes that they really need to include. It's not easy to teach, I think. Let's see if I go back. I mean, if I go back to the criteria, and sometimes I'll use the criteria here, and going back, and so you can see under content at the top here, key information is included, and a little bit further down, key information may be missing, and they start to understand that in order to get a high grade, a grade A or a grade B, you can't omit key information. You might be able to omit information which is semi-relevant, but you really got to kind of drill into them that the recipient needs to take over care of the patient. They need to read this letter and they need to know exactly what to do. But it's not an easy thing to teach. Partly it goes down, I think, to identifying the purpose, being clear on why you're writing the letter. And that goes back to the 5 minutes reading time. If you don't know why you're writing the letter, and if you don't know what you want the recipient to do, the chances are your letter isn't going to be completely relevant. Um, if you know the purpose, if you know exactly what I want the recipient to do and why I'm writing this, then hopefully it's easier to identify those key points. Okay, is that okay? Yeah, okay. We'll keep going. Okay, great. So, and again, yeah, to show them something like this is kind of useful. And again, the nurses will look at this and think, well, okay, great, this is for the doctor's task. But if they've read the task, if they've done their homework and actually read it, great, they'll follow it. And same with the doctors, when you show them the nursing task as well and how it's been marked, it really helps. This, it's kind of just some grammar as well. Again, it doesn't matter too much if you're going to teach grammar in class. This is just a passive structure, and we were looking at some advanced passive structures. You can see the sentence, Mr. Baker is to be discharged back into your care. It's a neutral sentence. You could find that in a medicine task. You could find it in a nursing task. So that's the only thing, is just keep the language neutral. But this presentation that we do when teaching passives, it makes no difference really who is in the class. And they're happy again to work together. It's almost a little bit more like EFL at this point. And again, this task they do in class, they just practice passive structures. And you don't need to, I don't divide them, so I don't put the nurses together and the doctors together, but really mix them up. And you're looking at people who really, their grammatical ability, and the same thing with EFL, just pairing again stronger and weaker students. Do you have a question, Anne? Did you put your hand up? No. Okay. Okay. Okay.
No, I don't have a question.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we'll keep going. That's kind of the writing bit, and I'm going to move on just to the speaking. And hopefully there are some questions. We've got time for questions at the end as well. So just some things with the speaking. You can see here I've isolated almost everything here, and there's just a little bit of context. I just wonder whether you'd be able to identify whether this is from a nursing or a medicine task. What do you think?
I think a medical.
Okay. Everyone's nodding their heads. Everyone's agreeing with you. I think this is from a nursing task, possibly.
Okay.
But the thing is, you can't tell. It's impossible. It could be either, and that's why I've isolated everything. Sometimes when you're doing speaking in class, you do get raised eyebrows, and the nurses might look at you and think, "Why am I doing this?" Or the doctors will look at you and think, "Well, this is a nursing task, you know." But really, again, you're teaching here. We're teaching a strategy, or we're teaching a particular theme. That the idea was to deal with challenging patients. That was the learning objective, how to deal with challenging patients. So in a way, it didn't matter too much about the task, because again, whether you're a nurse or a doctor, it's kind of like the same strategy. So what we do here, basically, we isolate everything and then they work together with the partner and they do this just for 2 minutes. It's not a full speaking task. It's just kind of a snippet of a task. Again, it doesn't matter whether doctors are working together or nurses are working together, but it's quite common. What we do is we mix it up. After they've done that, then you kind of just look at a sample answer together. And again, really we're just focusing on language, and that language is something they can use in a medical task or a nursing task. They might then do a whole task, or they might just redo the task again. It kind of, there's so many different variations, but I think the important thing is, to kind of mix it up. If you have done a doctor's task, then next to do a nursing task as well. So this task as well, having done a nursing task, this is now from a doctor's, but again, it's completely neutral. Again, it's to deal with challenging patients, and it's the same kind of principles as with the first task. There's a question, I don't know if it's just come up or I've just seen it. I would like to know about what you usually do for the other professions. Okay, are you talking about speaking here? Yeah.
Writing as well.
Oh, for writing. Okay. We only do nurses and medicine, so we don't do the other professions. Okay. Okay. So we'll keep going here. Again, feedback with the whole class. Sometimes we get them to read it out, or they can read it quietly, and then they redo the task, or you might do another task. Another thing that we do, and again, we do this kind of with mixed professions. This is adapted from, I think, Good Communication Practice, which is a medical book from Cambridge. And again, you're just looking at language. I'm just going to highlight here. Yeah, you can see all this language here, which they kind of want to use in the task. And you're talking about giving advice. There's benefits and side effects. There's a small task here. Giving advice, I've got a small example here as well. And even with negotiating treatment, there's some language for them to use. So again, it doesn't really matter whether nurses and doctors are working together or working separately. When you're doing the preparation, you're really looking at language. It is almost a little bit more like grammar or a speaking lesson. You might do some modeling and drilling and some pronunciation work as well. And then having done this, we'd move on to doing a task like this, which is where you need to give advice. It's a nursing task. I've taken this from, I think it was one of Gerling Carer's books, and we slightly adapted it. But the focus is on giving advice. So all that language they've just used, that we've just looked at, which is the language here, they then get to put it into practice. I think the key here, that the doctors don't really mind, because what they want to do is they want to use all of this language. And then they don't really mind doing a nursing task, but the key is then to do a doctor's task after you've done the nursing task, to get a balance. A lot of it depends kind of how you're restricted for time as well. And it's nice if you have enough time to do both tasks. Again, a sample answer as well. So once they've done the task, you can look at the task, and generally then we get them to redo the task as well. You can play around with it. You can show them the sample answer before they do the task. That's something else we do. Sometimes we model the task and then they do the task. And again, in the feedback, or you might do this before they do the task, really you're just focusing on language. So again, all of this is relevant to both doctors and to nurses. When we do an overview of the task as well, it doesn't really matter too much whether it's a nursing or a doctor's task here. Again, I think this is something I stole off Rebecca's masterclass video. You're not actually looking at the task or how to do the task. You're just looking at what the task is. And that's the same for all professions. So even though this is a nursing task, you're not really talking about the content. You're really focusing on the format of the task, what it is. So you could use that with both professions. And it's the same when you have the criteria. You can see there's a writing task here, but I've taken out the setting and also the profession because it's fairly neutral. I think this is from, I'm not sure, I think it's a medicine task, but it's not too dissimilar from a nursing task. But removing all of the context, the setting, it really lets you just focus on the criteria. And again, it's relevant to both professions. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And I don't know if you've got any questions. We've got a few minutes left for some questions.
Where will the slides of your presentation be available?
I'm going to send this to Rebecca. It's being recorded, and I think she was probably going to send it around to the premium members.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So there are any other questions? Do you guys teach mixed professions?
Can I just ask something?
Sure.
So yeah, we don't actually. We separate nurses and doctors, okay, but we don't get very many doctors doing courses. Do you find they ever complain that it's mixed, or it doesn't?
No, to be honest, no. A couple of times, you get raised eyebrows, and the nurses or the doctors look at this and think, why am I doing this? But generally, actually, no. I think because every time they get a writing task, it is specific to their own profession. Yeah. So I've never asked a nurse to do a doctor's task or vice versa. With speaking, I mean, and generally they're
almost all the same.
Yeah, and they're all really nice. They're kind of all under a lot of pressure to pass this exam, and they're actually really supportive of each other. So on the whole, no, it's been okay. And a lot of the teaching, like as you probably know, it applies to both. Selecting, organizing, transforming. The principles are the same for any profession.
I really like that task where you've got the notes and then two separate tasks. I think that's fantastic.
Sure.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because then you can work on the same thing together rather than separately. So that's great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's great. And even, I mean, I really like the fact that we've written our own tasks and you've got both doctors and nurses, because when you're doing feedback, it really works well. And they're always interested. I mean, we were talking about what's relevant and what's semi-relevant. I think you asked about, keynotes and how do you identify what's key and what isn't. And then when you're talking about a task with the nurses, the doctors are always really interested in what you're saying, because they've got different notes, and it works both ways. So a lot of the stuff, actually, it does really work well together. It's a little bit time consuming to make your own materials, but once you've done it, you find that you have got a nice bank of materials there.
I would just assume that mixing nurses with doctors could also be beneficial in the long term, because in a work context, working as part of a team, they're required to work alongside each other. So if they're with each other in a classroom environment, I would assume that would be advantageous for them anyway in the long term. Knowing how to work alongside and getting an insight into each other's remit, into each other's workload.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Our courses are, we run courses range from 1 week to 4 weeks, and it's a shame, like we'd like to expand it and kind of do more stuff which is related to work and work environment. But I think you're absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And they do really work well together.